Okay,
All right.
looks like it's on.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. It's now 12:30 here in Carbondale, Colorado, and I'm Rita Marsh. I'm one of the founders and on the board of the Center for Human Flourishing, which many of you might have previously known as Davina Kent. We're taking fully our responsibility for educating people under the integral health model, so we're assuming the name the Center for Human Flourishing. And today I'm joined by Sylvie Lam. Sylvie is a relatively new member of the Carbondale community. She's a psychotherapist and a body worker, has a special body work that she provides. So we're just going to have a conversation today to discover what Sylvie's journey has been in her life and what brought her here to Carbondale and how she's become a part of our practitioner community. So welcome, Sylvie. It's good to be with you today.
You too, it's an honor. Really appreciate the mission that you hold in your organization and what you do for the community.
Thank you. It's been quite a journey, and with the situation with COVID-19 and the shutdown, we haven't been doing programs in person. So we're actively taking on the role of providing information through the Zoom platform, which is pretty amazing. And it has its ins and outs, but I think it's a good way for people to join in conversation. So I'm glad to be with you today. So Sylvie, where did you grow up? Where did you land on the planet?
I like the way you put that. Like we're kind of little spaceships getting ready to land. I grew up in Boston, outside of Boston, and I was technically born in Philadelphia, so I landed there. But I think, that growing up on the East Coast was a big formative thing for me culturally. And every time I have an intake session with a potential client, I always mention that I'm from the East Coast because I think there's a truth telling, like in a little bit of like a tough love, honesty that comes from that background for me.
Well, interesting. Philadelphia, of course, being the seat of independence of this country.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of powerful energy there.
Totally.
And when you say you grew up outside of Boston, was it a small town or a suburb of Boston?
Well, yeah, my parents were divorced when I was young. So I grew up in many different places all at once. Um, living kind of, Boston kind of just sprawls itself out. And so I lived in, I guess you would call it suburbs, but like pretty city, residential feeling suburbs. Um, and then when I was a little bit older, my mom moved to more of a country suburb. So I spent the latter part of my childhood getting to play in the woods,
Uh-huh.
which was a really big um, resource for me. I think that was a really big blessing.
To have that connection with nature is certainly very grounding. Yes. So you were fortunate.
Yeah, very.
And you went through your elementary, middle, and high school in those communities and
Mhm.
then took off for college right away, or did you take a time between?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to take a year off. And I think I'd wanted to for a long time. Actually, before I took that year off, I was really blessed to do a high school semester in Leadville in Colorado.
Oh my
So
gosh.
that was my first introduction to Colorado. I did an outdoor education program for a semester, and we did a lot of camping and learning through being outdoors. And that kind of planted a little bit of a seed of like, oh, maybe I don't have to do everything the way everyone else has done it. Maybe there's more out there beyond the sort of path that I'm watching everyone else walk on. And when I was at that program, I remember having some different gap year programs come in and explain what a gap year was. And when I was in high school, that was pretty new to take time off before college. So I
Yes.
ended up taking up a bunch of time working, doing my first like real earning experience, and then going to India.
Oh, how wonderful. Yes.
Yeah.
And where did you travel in India?
We were mostly in Varanasi, which is in the north, and it's one of the oldest living cities, and did a lot of homestay and staying in that particular area for most of the time. So I was there for quite a few months and really got to like root into what real life is like a little bit there. And that was definitely one of the bigger transformative experiences I had as a young adult.
Uh-huh.
Really grateful for that opportunity to really see how different the world can be based on where you're born and who you're
Yes.
born.
Yes. How interesting. And then did you choose a career path right away? How did this all evolve that you became a therapist?
It's been such a windy road, Rita. I wish we had other people here to see how many people, knew right away. I think that when you're being, I think there's some people who are lucky enough to be born with purpose in their bones. And I think for a lot of the rest of us, it's a willingness to try and fail and explore and not necessarily get there the way you thought you were going to get there. So I thought I was going to be a midwife. I was really into birth and curious about the intersection of the modern medical model and holistic models.
Uh-huh.
And I did like took pre-med classes in college and all of that. And then when I left school the summer after I graduated from college, I was actually diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease. And I had a really big, I'd call it like a dark night of the soul 2 years where I was pretty um, incapacitated. Like my whole world was about healing and going in and trying to figure out how to reorient to the world in a body that wasn't working the way I thought it should. And I learned a lot about life. It
Uh-huh.
was kind of like an intensive training course in life and pain and loss and grief and um, the connection between the mind and the body.
Uh-huh.
Um, so that was a big reorienting moment for me. And the journey from there out was really about trying to heal myself,
Yes.
and everything I did that was sort of career focused was also about me trying to figure out what healing meant. So I went to herbalism school. I worked in a apothecary. I went to yoga teacher training and I taught yoga classes and I took a health coach training. And I just was really curious about what it means to heal and to be well
Yes.
in all aspects. And in that time, I moved out to Boulder. And so my studying was really like also in the community, like learning from Five Rhythms dance and exploring nature and the connection that I had with nature. And what I realized somewhere down that path was that I wanted to be able to have a more solid base of understanding of um, trauma in particular,
Yes.
because I found that when I was teaching yoga, the things that fascinated me the most was that intersection of the mind and the body. And I also felt really strongly that I wanted to be able to be accessible. And so, if you are an herbalist or a yoga teacher, you aren't able to bill insurance, right? And there's a level at which you're only accessible to people who can afford your services.
Yes.
Um, so I felt like I wanted to invest in a more traditional route to get more education and to have an offering that could be um, like more widely accessed. So then I chose to go to grad school.
And that was at Naropa. Is that correct? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I went to the mindfulness-based transpersonal counseling program there.
Wonderful. And I was just thinking, when you're an herbalist or a yoga teacher, you don't really uh, essentially develop relationship with clients in a deep way,
Yeah.
because it's more of interaction over a shorter period of time. And in the career path you've chosen, you really are committed into relationship with people.
Mhm. Yeah, that's such a good reflection. I think that's really nourishing to me is deep connection. And I did realize, and I think this is at the core of my work, that I don't want to be in a field where I'm coming in as the expert fixing the problem, which I think you get in therapy as well. But my real core belief about healing is that we are here to support someone else's unfolding, and that I don't actually know that much more than the person who's on their own healing path. I mean, I have a lot of knowledge, but that's not the thing that's actually going to facilitate their healing in the long term. What's going to change them is them. So I really appreciated Naropa's perspective on that. And that's why I resonated with their program.
And of course, through your own healing journey, you discovered that relationship with self was essential in order to heal and
Mhm.
to sit in a place where you could offer a, a container for people to do that work for themselves. It seems like to me that's what you've set up.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's not over. That's part of what's interesting about this career is I'm constantly being asked to do more growing and more self-exploration.
Now, there's a particular body work that you do.
Mhm.
Can you tell me how you got connected with this teacher, with this school?
So
And
it's yeah, I'll
yeah,
I'll give a little tweak. It's actually not body work. It's all therapeutic psychotherapy, but it includes the body.
okay, all right.
We name it somatic psychology, technically. Um, and some people do incorporate these practices into their body work, but I come at it from a psychology lens and incorporate the body in that way, if that makes sense.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
all right. And a particular method, does it have a name?
Yeah. So I am trained in something called the Hakomi method. Hakomi comes from a Native American word. Of course, I'm blanking on the meaning at this moment, but I'll look it up for you. And Hakomi was created by this man named Ron Kurtz in the 60s and 70s. And it pulls from a lineage of both psychodrama and experiential psychotherapy. So things like Gestalt, internal family systems, I think evolved after that, but a lot of more present moment focused types of therapy that we're developing then. And this body of work that we're focused on bioenergetics, Lowen's work with the body and the energy system, Reichian work on how we hold things in the body. So it really combines a lot of different theories and
Uh-huh.
approaches.
And this training was in Boulder, is that right?
Yeah, they have trainings all around the country and actually around the world. I did my training in Boulder and continue to be really involved in that program as a teaching assistant. And I think that this particular type of therapy and healing really drew me in because it really transformed something for me personally. And I can say a little bit more about it if that would be helpful.
Yes, it would. I'm very curious. Yes.
So Hakumi, it works with 5 core principles, which are mindfulness, nonviolence, mind-body integration, unity, and organicity. So in
What was that last one?
organicity,
Oh,
so meaning we each are our own organism,
okay.
have our unique journey, our unique internal experience and unique way of healing. So on the one hand, we have unity. We all are human. We have common ways that we work psychologically. We have common themes, and we are also all unique. And holding both understandings at the same time is really important. And then the other piece is mindfulness. Mindfulness really allows us to have work that's not just repeating what our stories are or what our perceptions are, but it allows us to actually be present and be curious. I'm sure you have more thoughts on mindfulness. And mind body integration speaks to the importance of everything that is us, not just our mind, not just our body or our spirit, but the way that all those things communicate. And nonviolence is really about an attitude of meeting someone where they are and not forcing anything to happen that's not ready to happen. And so those are the main principles that guide Hakumi. It feels really gentle at times. It can be really slow because of the mindfulness aspect. And the core goal of Hakomi work is to help people change core material. And what I mean by core material is the unconscious beliefs and patterns that we continue to enact in our lives. So, when we are born and when we are young, we absorb and create glasses, right, that we see the world through. And they are in the form of thoughts that are subconscious, like, it's better to be independent than to need people, right? And then what happens is our behavior creates a pattern with that that's self-reinforcing. And our body also creates a pattern, right? So there's something about the way that I hold myself that I'm going to be independent. And that's going to change the way that my posture is, that my
Yes.
muscles with each other, right?
Yes.
And so core material, it could be called personality, it could be called outlook, it could be called patterns or addictions, but in its essence, it's just the way that we are in the world,
Uh-huh.
right? And so the ideal, Hakomi process is to create a relationship where it's safe for a client to start to become self-aware about all those unconscious ways that they are in the world. And we do that by creating experiences where they are able to watch what their body does, watch what their mind does, watch how they relate to others, and become conscious of what is usually largely habitual. Are you with me?
Very,
That's kind of
yeah,
head.
no,
Okay.
very interesting. That's very,
Yeah.
very interesting.
And
Yes,
then, ultimately the goal is once you have awareness of those patterns, to have opportunity to practice doing something different. First in the therapeutic relationship and then out in the world. And so the real goal of therapy is not to change who you are, but to have more choice about who you choose to be, right? To be able to say, I really like that I'm independent and that's something I've fostered, but I can see that I'm making myself a little sick by not being able to get help. So I'm going to continue to be independent, but I'm also going to figure out how I can feel comfortable allowing support in, right?
very, very interesting. And
Mhm.
through this experience with Hakomi, you deepened your healing process, and it became significant for you personally. So
Mhm.
you certainly have a passion to provide this for others, this opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. And like everything, the more we talk about it, the more confusing it feels. But when you're in the seat with someone and you're doing therapy, it's actually quite simple. It's just about having someone sit there with acceptance for everything that you feel in that moment and having someone come in with curiosity and a sense of exploration. And I think even that is healing, just to have someone be present with you in that way.
In that way, yes. Now, you had a practice in Boulder. Uh, you were seeing clients at an office. Did you have an office
Yep,
there? Mhm.
yep, yep. And had to give that up with COVID and the move out here. So
So, what brought you to Carbondale?
good question. My my partner is also a therapist. He works in the addiction field and has very different approach and motivation. But he got a job offer at Jaywalker Lodge.
Oh, okay.
Uh-huh. And, I think as I've done a lot of healing and self-reflection, I have realized that my nervous system is actually really sensitive. I've come to embrace the part of me that really needs quiet,
Mhm.
space, and nature. And this felt like a really good opportunity to move somewhere where I could have more of that. So I feel really excited to be in Carbondale because I also am getting this sense that I don't quite have to give up community and people who are really curious about these things in order to also have more space and nature and solo time.
Well, good. Well, I'm so glad that that worked out, that your husband found Jaywalker and uh, brought you here, or your partner, and brought you here along with.
Mhm.
Uh, Now, we're sitting in this place of months now into the COVID shutdown, lockdown. And how has that changed your practice? How has that shifted things for you?
I was thinking about that a lot today. Yeah, there are many aspects of what we're in the midst of. One of them is the practical piece, right? I'm working mostly virtually. That's a little bit less fun. It has some benefits as well, but there's that practical piece around the work that I do being about connecting and having to learn how to connect over technology. But then there's also this other deeper piece where there are all these global themes that are happening that we can't avoid. Not to say that these types of themes weren't happening before, but all of a sudden, a lot of people don't really have a choice at distracting themselves from the hopelessness, from the pain of others. And I'm seeing that show up a lot. Clients that I've worked with before COVID having a lot harder time in their lives, doing a lot deeper dives into bigger questions like, what is life about? Who do I want to be? What's my purpose? And I'm seeing a lot of trauma come up too. For
Yes.
people, particularly with histories of illness, that's coming up really strong. But it's also coming up in the couples that I work with because, everything, it's like the heat just got turned up globally, right? So everything that was kind of simmering before under the surface is now at a boil. And all the relationship things that weren't quite great, but we could avoid because we went to work are now in our face, right?
Yes.
And I think from a personal perspective, that's really painful. And it's been hard to sit with so many people in so much challenge. But from a global perspective, I think there's really big opportunity here because there's nothing like pain to force us to grow. Not to sugarcoat what people are going through, but I think there's a lot of energy around transformation right now because we're kind of stuck in it. We
Yeah.
can't distract, right?
We're certainly in the soup. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And it feels like the stone soup, where you put everything in the pot and have it simmering.
Ah.
And hopefully it turns out to be a delicious dish after all of this time and struggle. So how do clients find you? I'm sure you have clients that have carried on with you from your time in Boulder, but how do people connect with you here?
Yeah, I have had a lot of people just reach out on the internet, which is another pro con of the internet world. And I've been working really closely to build networks with other practitioners in the Valley. I have a really strong value that the best work is done when there's a holistic intent. And so I feel really excited about working with naturopaths, working with acupuncturists, working with, play therapists that work primarily with children so I can work with the parents. I think that when we're looking at the whole system, then the work is a lot more fruitful. So I feel excited to continue doing that and having people find me through other avenues. But right now, mostly on my website. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what would you say, just to go back to this somatic work that you do? How would you describe that as different from the normal talk psychology? The somatic work, yeah.
It's a great question and it's complex. But I think the simple answer is that when we come in and we think we're just going to talk about stuff and hash it out, or if we are taking even a behavioral approach, like where we're trying to cut back on a certain behavior or work with addiction, what we're doing is we're working on the waves of our present day life, right? It's like, man, it's feeling really wavy. I'm using alcohol a lot more, or my girlfriend just broke up with me and I really need help to navigate that. And I want to talk through that. That's the stuff that usually brings people into therapy. And
Uh-huh.
it's very important stuff. But if we just talk about what's happening up here, there are a few things that happen. One is that when we just tell the same story, we're reinforcing the same neural pathways, right?
Yes.
So if we have a story about, oh, I'm unlovable, and I'm going to go into therapy and I'm going to talk about how unlovable I am every day, we're just reinforcing that belief without thinking critically about if that belief is helping us or not, right? So from a neuroscience perspective, talk therapy can or cannot be helpful sometimes, right? And then we're also missing this deep layer that we talked about earlier, which is, why are these things happening?
Mhm.
Why am I reaching for alcohol? Why is this the third partner that's broken up with me? Why do I feel like I'm reenacting my family again and again, right? And that's, I think, where somatic psychology can be really powerful, because it helps us to look at the unconscious, right? Our body holds the unconscious. Um, our body holds our emotions,
Holds our
right? Our
story.
body
Yes.
holds our story, holds our intuition. And so using awareness of sensation, using the body, can be a great way to circumvent that same narrative happening over and over. And if we're talking about trauma work in particular, what people are learning about trauma is that a lot of the reason that someone still might suffer after a traumatic event is because their body is holding on to that story and their nervous system hasn't fully processed what happened. So I think that somatic therapy for trauma in particular is really an important resource for people to look into.
Mhm. Yes. I had the fortune of training with Dr. David Berselli, who developed trauma release exercises,
Yeah.
and very much realized how much, just through my own experience, how much my body was holding a story that was preventing me from feeling whole. And it's a form of somatic therapy, and it's a very active therapy. So I certainly understand what you're talking about, just from my own experience.
Yeah. Rita, what would you want someone to know about, like, what you experienced, if they're going through feeling like they can't resolve trauma in their life?
Well, just the fact that being aware of the body, of my body and all aspects of it, and and realizing that through a release of energy and a release of uh, I would say release of held pattern,
Mhm.
can bring something into consciousness that um, was so hidden and so dark and so held, that it, it's amazing. It's just like, oh, a light goes on, and a lightness of being occurs.
That's a beautiful description. Yeah. Almost
Uh,
feels like something that.
yes, yes, exactly. So what type of clients do you like working with? Who are the folks you most enjoy inviting into your circle?
That's a great question. Well, I should say one thing about that first, which is that I work with individuals and I also work with couples. And I love both work equally and differently. So I'll answer for both of those. For individuals, I really love working with people who want to go a little bit deeper, who maybe have done talk therapy and feel like they're not actually healing or moving in the way they want to move. I really love working with people who have done a little bit of self-awareness, self-growth, exploration already and want to bring that in. And people who are curious about themselves. I think that's a good way to sum that up. I do specialize in working with trauma and particularly relational trauma. So different forms of abuse, different forms of sexual abuse, and what we call attachment wounds. So relationship wounds. I do a lot of work with survivors of sexual abuse, either childhood or adult. And I care a lot about that work. Mm-hmm. And then in couples, I just really like working with anyone who is open to growing through relationship. I think one of my personal missions is to destigmatize couples therapy, because there's a statistic that says that couples come into therapy on average 7 years after they should have come in. And if you think about how much, we talk about it medically, like how much would change if we were able to do preemptive work with people right before they get diabetes, talk about nutrition and other types of wellness. I think the same is really true for couples. If people can come in when they're just hitting bumps and they want to be better together, it's much better to come in then than when there's been an affair.
When there's been crisis, yes. Preventative work is really something I moved into after years of, I was in the emergency room for a number of years dealing very directly with trauma, and became very concerned about, well, why are people choosing these paths that end them up in such dire situations? So I made some career shift so I could work more proactively with people. And that's why I became a family nurse practitioner. So I certainly understand what your where your heart is with that. And we had a conversation before we agreed to do this interview, and you mentioned a couple of things about the remote work and what shows up with clients and clients and their pets. Do you want to relate that to the larger audience?
Yeah, I think people who feel hesitant to come in during COVID because they're scared it won't be as effective or it'll feel awkward to be on the computer. I think some degree of that is true. It is kind of weird to hang out on a computer with someone. And I think some of the sweet benefits that Rita started to mention are like being safe in your own home actually allows a deeper level of work to happen sometimes. And a lot of things like having your pets around. I've had a lot of pets come in and snuggle with clients as they're going through something hard. I think there's a lot of benefit. And particularly with couples, I think I had mentioned, Rita, that part of the work I do is really focused on the neuroscience of relationship. And it works heavily on the habitual part of our memory, which means that if you're doing therapy and you're in an office, the things that you remember and the things that you bring home with you are a little different than if you actually do therapy in your living room, because you're being stimulated by all the familiar things. And you're also, when you try something different, you and your partner have a different way of interacting, that also gets wired into the space as well when you're in the space. So it sounds a little woo-woo, but it's actually been really cool to see people in their homes.
And so if they make a shift in their behavior in that known environment, the environment picks that energy up too and can reinforce it. So
Yeah,
if they're in your office and they have that experience, and then they go home, they may see some triggers in their home that doesn't support that change that they've been guided to make.
exactly. So like when we talk about addiction, right? We talk a lot about how, if you are sober, but you're going back to the same places with the same people, it's a lot more likely that you're going to relapse, because when we're surrounded by those triggers, we lapse back into old behavioral patterns. Same thing's true of a fight or saying a snarky thing to your partner, right? If you have a different experience and it gets connected to the same stimuli, then that stimuli doesn't necessarily provoke you into the same old patterns. There's more option, right?
Or opportunity to make choice for health, for wellness.
Exactly.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah. And I'll just give one more plug for couples therapy. When you
Okay.
health and wellness, a lot of the studies they're doing on relationship show that if the relationship is mostly good, doesn't have to be, no relationship is always good, but if it's mostly good, our lifespan increases incredibly. Whereas if it's a corrosive, harmful dynamic, our lifespan actually decreases, because when we are under stress in our relationships, our overall allostatic load increases, our stress load, and everything about stress comes from that. So even if couples therapy seems maybe inappropriate, it can still be an investment in your own health, which is an interesting reframe.
Yes, and we know from this experience with COVID, people who are in distress, who are already stressed, have been more likely to um, get the virus and have a real challenge. So, you know, encouraging people to stay as healthy as possible, mind, body, and spirit during this time is just so important. And I really want to spread that word rather than how many positive tests we had today in our community. Spread the word that there are certain personal actions and in community actions that can be taken to strengthen the immune system and to decrease stress, and the courage to look at self-relationship and relationship with family members is certainly a good platform to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to give you the platform to have everyone in the country hear that. Important.
Yes. So how you mentioned that people can reach you by going to your website, and is that sylvielam.com, is that correct? And I have your wonderful little card here, and I love this saying, all of you is welcome here. Bring all of you, and we'll work together and create new possibilities. So is there anything else you'd like folks to know about you and your practice and what you have to offer today?
Good question. I'd really welcome people to reach out, even if they aren't sure about therapy, um, because I'd love to know more about the community. I really have appreciated connecting with the people I've already connected to. But I feel very aware that as a provider, my goal is to meet the needs in the community, and I want to know more about what those needs are. So, for example, I have a lot of ideas about things in the works. Um, I've already run a group for survivors of sexual assault, and I'd like to create an ongoing resource for that population. And I've also been thinking a lot about how to have couples retreats that are both fun and really deep, and maybe even some type of premarital program that's non-denominational. So I have a lot of ideas of things that I'm working on, but I really want to to be forming them based on what people need and want. So I'm excited to hear from anyone who has thoughts to share. And I do have um, my phone number is on the website, and you can also send me like fill out a form through the website with comments and questions.
A contact form on your website. Well, good. Uh, in my experience of meeting you and having a couple of conversations before we did this today, I just wanted to say what a warm, welcoming aura you have about you. And so I encourage people to reach out, and especially anyone that's struggling during these times of isolation. And I loved what you said about doing premarital work with couples and helping them really affirm their love for each other, and without barbs that
Yeah,
could be hooked onto as they move into their time together.
yeah,
So I think that that's a wonderful service to offer.
good. I'm glad maybe you're not a taker, but I have one support.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
really have appreciated getting to know you. And like I said, connection and collaboration is a big part of what keeps me going in this work. So I look forward to more connection.
Yes. Well, I'm sure there will be. And I really thank you for your time today. And we'll make sure that this recording gets out to people so they can begin to understand what you have to offer, and that you hopefully will gain some clients from this, and more people will get to appreciate what you have to offer and who you are. So thanks, Sylvie.
Thank you, Rita.
Bye-bye. Have a wonderful day.
You too.